Because we've attached this normal and this perfect in our heads that now you're just trying to achieve it, and that perfect keeps changing every time you see a new thing, new person, new this, and it's an exhausting cycle of then you just get exhausted and
life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So a lot of fear, shame, and inadequacy is part and parcel of the growing experience. When that's combined with a certain biological predisposition, that's when you develop an addiction.
I feel like having that one place where you can see what safety looks like is so important. Most of us can have it with people we know, like our friends and family, but for those who don't, I think therapy can be a beautiful space for it, no? Yeah. Hello everyone, welcome to iDare presents Breakfree, a safe space to overcome and unlearn patterns, habits or relationships that hurt our well-being or don't serve us well. Today we have with us Dr.Azhar Hakim, who is a physician, a psychotherapist, and most importantly for me, my therapist. Welcome, Dr. Azhar.
Hi, Vaamaa.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Nice to see you. Nice that you're in Bombay.
Yeah, I'm so happy as well. I want to start off today by talking to you about your journey and how you got into therapy and specifically working in the field of addiction and recovery and with like substance abuse and things like that.
You sure you want to know that?
Thoda sa I know, but I want to know more.
So I've got this resume that will always get me an interview because it's been all over the place. I went to med school, finished my MBBS. During the course of my MBBS, I discovered the wonderful world of substances. That included alcohol, prescription medicines, and I had, let's say, a romantic affair with these substances. I finished up with med school and I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I really wasn't interested in medicine. I had developed an addiction towards the substances. So what I did was after I finished my MBBS, I actually quit the medical field and decided I was too cool for medicine. And I wanted to do a lot of fun stuff in life. And I did a bunch of other jobs for around 8 or 9 years, in which I had a progressively dysfunctional relationship with substances and therefore with people and with everything in my life. And it was only after emerging from that rabbit hole 8 or 9 years later that I sat down and looked at all this wreckage around me and all the mess that I had created with my life, and then asked myself what I really wanted to do. And it became clear to me that I wanted to help people who had similar issues that I did. After which I went to the US. I got my master's. And I specialized in what they call co-occurring disorders. That's when people have an addiction as well as a mental health condition. And I lived and worked in the US then for 9 or 10 years, worked in various rehab centers. Came back to India around 12 years ago, set up private practice, and now I'm with Samarpan, trying to do a decent job at helping people.
That's really lovely. Can I, if you don't mind me asking, so generally, like with addiction, I know it's biological, but it also is a little bit of your environment, right? Was there something in the environment that you grew up in that set that off for you?
Yeah, so addiction is biopsychosocial, right? There's a biological component and there's a psychosocial component. I grew into what was ostensibly a very good middle class, upper middle class family. But here was the thing, right? So my dad was a super successful guy. He came from nothing, grew up in very small, very difficult conditions, and in the 1950s ended up going to MIT on a full scholarship. His two sisters were PhDs back in the 50s. My Nana was this guy who had come to Bombay in the 1935s with that proverbial 5 rupiah in the pocket and made an empire. And by the time I was born, he had this palatial house. And I remember looking at all these people and saying, I am screwed. No way I'm going to measure up. And there was all this talk in the house about you must be a good boy and you may be a successful boy. And I had a growing sense of insecurity and inadequacy. Plus, my dad had a temper like you do not want to see. Right? So there was a lot of fear and there was a lot of inadequacy that was growing up. And I never really felt that I'm going to measure up to what these people wanted me to measure up to. Though I did exceedingly well. I did very well in school, I did very well in college, but the sense of fear and shame and inadequacy was always a part of me. And by the time I was 16, I remember I finished school, I was in JL college. I actually went through a period of depression. And at that time, we didn't have the vocabulary to understand what it was, right? But I kind of withdrew from life. I started feeling very hopeless about myself and about the future. There was a great deal of social isolation. The only thing that would give me some modicum of pleasure was music. And then I discovered alcohol. And, and it suddenly solved for a lot of the problems that I had in my life. It made me feel confident. It made me act like a particular way I could. It was liquid courage, right? And that's where my whole romance with substance started, right? And so I found that I could be the kind of person I want to be if I was under the influence. And so that was the psychosocial piece of it, right? So there was this fertile emotional ground, which alcohol fed on. But a lot of people go through that, right? The story that I have is not singular, it's not horribly traumatic, right? So a lot of fear, shame, and inadequacy is part and parcel of the growing experience. When that's combined with a certain biological predisposition, that's when you develop an addiction. And so the $1 million question, a lot of people, so what is this biological piece, right? So what do we understand? We understand that the experience of reward or pleasure is about dopamine in a certain part of my brain, the Mesolimbic Pathway. What does that mean? That means if I tell you I like reading, right? That means while I'm reading, I'm getting 100 units of dopamine in my brain saying this is good, you all karna chahiye. If you don't like reading, you're reading a book and you're saying, what the hell do these guys get out of reading a book? Because your brain is not firing dopamine to that, right? So let's say I like books, 100 units, I enjoy movies more, 200 units, and this is not actual figures, I'm just giving you a reference scale. Substances, the alcohol and whatever other substances are there, and certain behaviors like gambling and this thing normally give people, let's say, 300-400 units of dopamine. The response that a potential alcoholic or addict has is completely different, right? So we don't get 300-400 units. We get something in the region of 10,000 units.
Oh, what? Okay.
So that means, let's say you, me, and a friend, when we're 18 years old, we're going out drinking.
Yeah.
She's sitting and drinking a beer and wondering what the hell, I don't know what people love alcohol so much. Means her brain is not firing. You have the normal response, you're getting 300-400 units, you're saying, okay, this is nice and all. I'm sitting there and I'm getting a blast of 10,000 units, right? You have no frame of reference to understand how that makes me feel. Right? So what am I going to do? I'm going to chase it more frequently and in larger quantities.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm now drinking more often, I'm drinking larger quantities. It's allowing me to be a person and solving for a lot of the emotional stuff that's going on. And for the first 5-7 years, there's generally no issue. What happens though then is the brain is not developed or designed for this level of dopamine.
Okay.
So to sort of create a buffer to dampen the effects, it releases a chemical called glutamate. Now this is where it gets really tricky, right? So now the brain is saying, okay, there's too much dopamine coming in here, let's have some glutamate to pad the system. So I come to a point now that unless I'm getting the spike of dopamine, there's only glutamate loaded in my brain.
What does glutamate do?
It's got the exact opposite impact of dopamine. While dopamine is pleasure and stimulation, this is about dampening.
Oh, okay.
Right?
So it's more depressive in that sense.
It's more depressive, right? So now when I'm not on the substance, I'm feeling wretched. And now I'm drinking or using for relief. And that's when the thing is settled. So theoretically, I have a choice. But the minute I don't have that substance in my system, I am restless, irritable, discontent, agitated. And I will do anything at that time to get a drink. Right? And so by that time that happens, there's a whole neurological and biochemical basis to it. The good news is that if you stop feeding your brain with dopamine, it removes the glutamate. So after a period of time, you actually do feel fine.
How much time approximately? Or is it different for everyone?
Very, very different, but generally 2 to 5 months, the glutamate recedes. If people relapse after that, it's not because they're craving. It's because they've decided now maybe I'll be fine.
Okay.
And that doesn't happen because the minute you drink, you're going to get 10,000 units and you're going to be back chasing it.
So if you have that, is it right to say gene?
Well, there's multiple genes, you're not sure about it, but let's say a metabolic response that's abnormal.
Yeah. So if you have that metabolic response, then you're effectively saying that if I was addicted at one point, technically I should never go back to that substance.
You cannot.
You cannot.
So look at it. The easiest analogy is diabetes, right? So you and me can have the same food.
Yeah.
right? My body responds differently to it. I can develop diabetes, right? What does that mean? That means with the same food that you're eating, your blood sugar will go to 140 and come down in 2 hours. Mine will hit 300, will take 8 hours to come down,
Yeah.
right? There's no cure for it,
Got it.
right? I will have a disproportionate response of my blood sugar when I eat certain meals. Similarly, when I drink alcohol or use those substances, I'm going to get a disproportionate response. So I can never drink and use, and that's the hardest thing for anyone who's addicted to understand, because we go down this whole mantra of there has to be a way to moderate,
Yeah.
and it's heartbreaking because we make a concerted effort, right? We
Yeah.
don't want to give it up, and it's just one failure after the other till we come to the point in which we realize you can't do it.
Very interesting. And so a lot of people that we work with, it's especially like of the age of like students or young professionals starting out first jobs, second jobs and stuff like that. A lot of them use alcohol, weed as different ways to actually like numb what they're feeling, because they don't have the bandwidth to deal with what they're feeling, right? And or it becomes like, oh, I just need to sleep, I don't know what else to do, so I'll have a drink to go to sleep. When does that one drink a day change into something that you have a dependency on? So when does it become from social to like, oh, now I kind of like, I'm starting to get dependent, to now being addicted?
So here's the thumb rule, right? If you are using alcohol and substances purely recreationally in a social setting with your friends, the chances that you're going to develop an addiction are low. When you use it medicinally to manage feelings, anxiety, depression, sleep, stress, then the chances of you developing an addiction are extremely high. Because instead of working through the difficult issues, you are now associating relief with the substance, right? And that will get paired. So what will happen over a period of years is you will never develop the skills to deal with all the unpleasant emotions that life is going to throw at you, right? And you would have found this ingenious shortcut that works like this. And in 5 years, that ingenious solution, 5 years later, is going to be a monster problem.
Yeah.
Right? So life is tough for you kids. It's far tougher than it's been for, the expectations you all have, right?
Correct.
The world is your oyster. You can be anything you want to be, right?
Yeah.
So there's a whole deal of pressure. So built in that stress, anxiety, depression, insomnia, all of that is just baked into the pie, right? And so what you guys are trying to do at iDare, right, to help people cope in healthy manners, right, over and above substances, there's a whole bunch of things you can do to deal with these emotions. Alcohol is a shortcut. Weed is a shortcut. And if you use the shortcut early in life,
then
there's going to be an issue.
Yeah. So for somebody who has started using the shortcut, but they probably are not what you would call an addict, right? They've just started using the shortcut. What can they do in that situation?
Okay, so they can substitute, right? They can figure out what is the substance helping me with. Right? So let's say it's helping me relax at the end of the day, right? I have to develop alternates. So I'm not saying you got to give up weed or alcohol. Keep weed or alcohol for recreation with your friends. If you like the impact of the feeling of being high with alcohol, a lot of people like that. There's no issue. But you have to develop other things you can do. So yes, you are having stress, you can't sleep at night. Legitimate, right?
Yeah.
Instead of alcohol, talk to a friend, talk to a therapist, figure out what are the other strategies you can do. If you're angry about something, if you're hurt about something, all these difficult emotions, how do you regulate these emotions? You can get some help. If you understand how you can do that, then you can retain the substances in a recreational. But I tell people at that age, you got to be clear why you're using or why you're drinking.
Yeah.
Right? If you want to go out on a Friday night and a Saturday night with your friends and get shit-faced, that's less of a problem. What you'll face there is embarrassment. Right? You're not going to run into massive mental health issues.
Yeah.
Right? But if you start using it to cope with life, right? So I tell them it's fine to restrict the substances and the alcohol to fun in social settings.
Yeah.
Don't do it in isolation. Don't do it to change the way you feel.
That's a beautiful distinction, I think, for somebody who doesn't understand, say, the details of addiction and everything, just to realize that why are you drinking, and being conscious and mindful of that. So making sure that you're drinking just to have fun and be socially, like with your friends, is okay, or like with whoever. But when you're starting to use that to numb your feelings or deal with something in life which you are not able to deal with otherwise, then it becomes a problem. Correct?
And the commonest you see that is with nicotine with cigarettes, right? People smoke because they're bored. They've got nothing to do. I'm hitting my vape, I'm lighting a cigarette because you're bored, you're restless. Figure out other stuff to do.
Instead of using that as a coping mechanism.
Because if you start using that as a coping mechanism, your body is going to demand it ever more frequently.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I feel like also there's a lot of myths surrounding, say, alcohol, surrounding substances, and I want to talk to you, like not just myths, but also beliefs that people have, right? And I want to ask you a couple of these. I hear a lot of kids nowadays saying this, and I don't know how true it is, but I think it's like weed is natural, so it's not addictive. Is that true? How true is that? What does that mean?
Yes, weed is natural, so is poison ivy.
Yeah.
So just because something is natural doesn't mean it can't be harmful.
Correct.
Right? So weed, now, before they legalized weed, right, the THC is the active component ingredient in weed, right? It would have 3 or 4% of weed. Ever since weed has become a commercial enterprise, it's become industrial grade. So you're getting weed strains right now, bud and all that, which have got 20-30% THC. We have no studies, no data about what that is doing to the human brain.
Yeah.
Right? Can you develop an addiction on weed? 100%. You can develop an addiction to coffee, to chai, to cigarettes, to weed.
Social media.
Right? So you can 100% be addicted. So it'll be, but a lot of times weed addiction is like nicotine addiction. You can function.
Which is why it doesn't seem so.
So I'm smoking a pack a day of cigarettes.
Yeah.
I can't say I'm not addicted. Right? I can say I'm still functioning. So if you're waking and baking and smoking 3 or 4 joints through the day and saying I'm functional, that doesn't mean you're not addicted. The vast majority of addicts are functional way before they become dysfunctional.
Yeah, I think that's another myth, no? That all addicts look a certain way.
Yeah, you lined up in the gutter.
All addicts are violent. All addicts will be somewhere fallen down.
So the vast majority of addicts in the world today, alcoholics and addicts, are functional.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? They have jobs, they have wives, they have lives, they have everything. They have a lot of misery baked into that, but they're still functioning.
I think that's such an important distinction when you at least reflect on yourself, right? Because when you think of an addict, you have a picture in your mind as to this is what they look like. And obviously, if you're not fitting into that picture, then it's always like, oh, I'm not an addict because I don't fit that picture of being non-functional or dysfunctional or creating chaos. You might be creating that chaos for yourself, but...
Yeah, so this whole idea that you've got to be aggressive, boisterous, there are alcoholics who sit quietly at their home and they drink and they don't necessarily eat this thing. I mean, I had that issue, right? When somebody told me back in the 90s that you have a problem with addiction and you may be an alcoholic, I'm a doctor here, what are you talking about? As if a doctor is going to be, like a doctor will get diabetes, that I can understand. Right? Well, how can a doctor be an alcoholic? Right? So there's this whole idea that addiction, there's a guy ending up in Skid Row who's violent, who beats his spouse, who steals money. And that is probably 1% of the population. The vast majority of alcoholics and addicts are just very, very obsessed about how they're going to get their next drink and they don't want anybody to bother them. Right? It's like with any other medical condition, it doesn't show on your face. It's that 1% that you see in movies, right? That unfortunately has become representative of the problem. But that's no way the way it is.
Okay, so, I mean, I'm playing the devil's advocate, but... if they are functional, then what's the problem?
So they're functional. So generally, it's a damn good question, right? The vast majority of people who develop an addiction will be functional for a period of time. And they will come to a point in their life when they decide to quit, when generally it affects one of 3 areas in their life. Either their health, their ability to work, they want to work, right? Or their relationships. Until these 3 areas get impacted to some degrees, most people who have an addiction will remain in denial and will not quit. Right? What is the harm? They have to come to realize, as you know, if the family or the loved ones tries to impress upon them, this is the argument you get, I'm functional. And you can, even in the DSM, right, it has to create impairment or distress in your own life to qualify as a mental health disorder. So it's like the cigarette smokers, right? That's easy enough to understand,
Yeah.
right? They're addicted, but they're functional. Can you get a cigarette smoker to stop?
Very difficult.
Unless he or she comes to that point.
Yeah, like either it's health or something else.
Yeah.
Then.
So there's generally a pain point that happens there. I've done this for 20 odd years over there. I've never heard anybody come and say, you know what, doc, this is a beautiful day. I think I'm going to give up substances. Right? It's never, I've seen the light of God. I want to be a... There is a pain point. Right? You come to a pain point in which this is not working. That you're feeling more crap than you're feeling good. And that's when people come in. Now, that being said, you can raise awareness about these are the early warning signs. You can make it normal to talk about it. So people don't really need to go to that level of pain.
Correct.
Right? And that's the whole prevention approach. Right? In which you sort of, there's a lot we can do in terms of conveying information. That if you are, so most people won't even know, I guess I'm drinking so much. Is this a problem? Is this not a problem? Right? So we need a public awareness campaign to say, okay, these are the early warning signs.
What are the early warning signs?
So there's an increasing preoccupation in my mind about, okay, I'm looking forward to a certain time. So I would look forward to the weekend. I say everybody looks forward to the weekend. I'm looking forward to the weekend so that I can get high.
Okay.
Right? So there's a particular time of the day I keep looking. I spend a lot of time thinking and planning about it. I start doing it alone. It becomes my most preferred activity to do. I stop doing the other activities. Right? I increase larger and larger amounts of the substance. And I require larger and larger quantities to get the same effect.
Yeah.
Right? I build up tolerance to it. I end up using much more often and much more larger quantities that I do. I'll say I'm going to have 5 drinks and I'm going to go. And I'm there till 6 o'clock in the morning and there's a bottle of tequila down. Right? I end up ending. So all these are early warning signs in which this is getting out of my control. Right? And if you can talk to a therapist at that time, right? At that time when the addiction hasn't kicked in, there is a chance you can moderate.
That's very nice. That's good to know that like if you catch it in the early signs, then you have hope to at least be able to have a moderated and actually manage it without it being
goals in terms of quantity, frequency, and behavior.
Okay.
Right. See, by definition, if I can predict this is the frequency of my use, this is the quantity, and my behaviors will be like this.
Okay. That actually brings me to my other myth, which I hear a lot of people have, is I'm not addicted. I can stop whenever I want. And this is not just true for alcohol, but even say for Instagram or weed or like smoking or anything. They're like, oh, I've gone 2-3 days without it. It doesn't make a difference. I can stop whenever I want. So I'm not really addicted to it.
Yeah. So this is the other big myth, right? So people tell me, who's an addict? An addict is a person who can't stop. Bullshit. Can I say that?
Yeah, of course, please.
Complete bullshit. So I work with heroin addicts who can stop for 10, 15 days. Every Ramzan I work with some good old nearby who will say I'm going to quit for 30 days. I'll work with a Catholic in Indian who will give up for 13 days. The people will give up in Shravan. You can give up. You may be addicted. The first couple of days are tough. So an addict can stop. What an addict can't do is when they resume, they cannot do it in moderation.
Oh, that's the differentiation.
Right? They will go back to, again, classic smoker. I'm going to give up smoking. 2-3 months I give up smoking. I'm not even thinking of it that much. It's becoming progressively easier. And my friends say, we're going to Goa. Let's go to Goa. That's Goa, man. I just smoke only in Goa. By the time I'm back home, I'm back to that one pack. Right? So what happens if you've got whether it's through processes, right? Like gambling or social media or porn or whatever, or whether it's substances. If you have an addiction, you will be able to stop. And you will try to prove to yourself, see, I don't have a problem.
Yeah.
If you resume, you will go back to excessive use of it.
Understood.
And I tell people, try it. Right? You want to resume drinking? Set quantity, frequency, and behavior.
And if you can, then great.
More power to you.
Yeah.
Right? Say, I will not spend more than X amount of hours on social media. See the ingenious reasons your brain will give you. No, I've got a little more reason for this. Your brain will come up with fabulous reasons why it's legitimate.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. Like, I think sometimes you also start using social media or any of these things, right, to cope with things that you're trying to avoid in your life, and then it just becomes a rabbit hole that you go inside.
Yeah. So as I said, that doom scrolling, man, you can spend hours, right?
Yeah.
And people will argue, so why is it a problem?
I'm not hurting anybody.
Yeah, so it's not a problem. If you don't say it's a problem, it's not a problem. Yeah. So you can't get people to change. See, a lot of people will come, families will come to me and say, please tell him that, Baba, I'm not here to tell you to stop. I'm here to say, if you want to stop, I can help you.
Correct. Which is, I think, true for therapy also. Like,
Yeah.
you can't force anyone into change or into therapy. It's,
You're this moral repository of all good behavior.
yeah.
Right? And I will mold you into some idealized version of humanity.
Oh my God. And I think that is also very true. And I see that in families, but I also see that a lot in couples. Where it's like, my girlfriend wants me to go to therapy, so I'm here. I think that is also,
But that's our culture, right?
yeah,
So in the West, by the time you're 18, you're out of the house.
correct.
So nobody has the authority to speak in your life.
Yeah.
Right? You do what you want. When I was working there, I mean, you can't share anything with the parents. You can't even let them know the kids in treatment.
Yeah.
Here it's an entirely different, man. Everybody is part of it, right?
Yeah.
The parents will come, the chachas will come, the nanas will come, and everybody speaks into your life.
Yeah.
So that creates some challenges.
And I think that leads me to add my other belief that people have is alcohol is a very isolating thing, and like, you know, if it affects the person. But I think I've seen like myself that like it doesn't just affect the person, right? It affects everybody around you.
So there is a thing. It's a family disease. There is not one person in the family who will not be impacted by it. The people who you're living with. It will impact your parents. If you're living with your parents, it will impact your spouse. It will
Whoever.
impact your kids. Right? Because the psychological trauma that they undergo is horrific.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
The behaviors are not under control. To see a loved one in a particular state, right? You will always love the person, but it becomes very difficult to hold that person in any regard.
Yeah.
And for a child to not be able to hold their loved one, a parent in regard, to not hold your partner in regard, and leave alone not holding them in regard, then a disdain develops, a revulsion develops. And then you have conflicted feelings that should I be feeling this way about a loved one? And so there's guilt around that. Then it's a whole big secret. So you can't talk about it. So then you have shame built in there.
Yeah.
Right? And then there is this rage about why me? And then why doesn't somebody do something, right? So I have yet to work with a family system that has not been impacted.
And I think that's why I feel like with addiction or with any of these issues, not only does the person with the addiction need therapy, but I think like the family and the entire support system also needs to like be able to learn
100%. So
how to.
see, there are three, in my opinion, not written anywhere in stone, there are three areas in mental health that require specialized programs.
Yeah.
Right? One is addiction, second is trauma, sexual violence, and third is eating disorders.
Yeah.
Right? You need a very, very holistic, system-oriented approach.
Correct.
To this. One component of that is individual therapy. Then there are group therapies, indispensable.
Support groups,
group counseling.
Wow, yeah.
Right? Then you need the family therapy. Right? Embedded in that, sometimes you need psychiatric help. You require medication for maybe short term or medium term. And all of this has to be developed as a plan. You know, it's not ad hoc, chalo, right? So you got to do a full kind of assessment to understand. I'm not saying in a day you should do a paper pencil thing, right? You can do that. I hate doing that. But over the course of 3-4 sessions initially, as you're building a relationship with the person, you understand all the moving parts, right? Because each of them will impact the other.
Right.
And groups are essential, right? Because they become symbols of hope if you've got people who've been there. Symbols of support, and it eliminates the shame.
Yeah. And I think that would also mean that your recovery is so linked to the kind of support systems you have, right? I feel like in general with mental health and with addiction, it can be extremely isolating, but your healing journey has to be with people who understand you and support you. And I think one of the things I have to say is something you told me. Like in the healing journey, it gets very lonely. And I remember we were having a chat about it. And this is like one quote that stuck to my head like forever, which is that being lonely, like the opposite is not being with someone, it's being understood and being safe, like this. So I feel like safety, trust, that community is what propels your healing journey, no?
It's a safe space. See, majority of people are completely capable of healing
Yeah.
by themselves, right? A big part of our job is to create the environment.
Yeah.
You create safety, you give the person a sense of understanding, they will talk. And in the process of their talking, they will generate most of their goals, most of their solutions. You
Yeah.
just have to prod and nudge. But that's what the groups provide, right? Or it starts with individual counseling, but then that's okay, only my therapist gets me, nobody else is going to get me. And then you sort of do that to a larger group. And the opposite of loneliness is understanding. You need to feel
Yeah.
understood.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Some people say the opposite of addiction is connection.
Hmm.
Right? So mental health disorders by nature are isolating, right? We believe that we are singularly affected.
And no one will get it.
No one will get it. Right?
And why should I be a burden on someone?
That's another big one, right? So when you realize support groups are not being a burden on them, this is actually helping them develop strengthen their own recovery. All of that goes away.
Yeah, I think what you said also, I feel like that was something I felt for a very long time, where I think as a kid, when I came to you, I think I was 14 or 15 years old.
Yeah.
And I think I was like, in my head, I was like, only Dr. Azhar gets me. Nobody else in the world gets me. And nobody will ever get me. And only with time, I think also because of the therapy sessions, and I was able to see what safety looked like, that like in different ways in my life, am I able to like actually create that within for other people, for myself, and all of that. And I feel like having that one place where you can see what safety looks like is so important. Most of us can have it with people we know, like our friends and family, but for those who don't, I think therapy can be a beautiful space for it, no?
Yeah. And that's one of our key responsibilities, right? If you actually give hope, right? You tell people that you can find a space. Initially, that person will think it will only be with you, doc.
Yeah.
That's okay as a starting point. But you've created that sense of, okay, I can be understood.
Yeah.
Right? And then so ever so slowly, you sort of seek it out outside of that. And you're right. If you have that within your family or your friend network, you're blessed.
Yeah.
If you don't, for God's sake, talk to somebody.
Yeah.
I mean, life is hard enough the way it is. You don't need to make it harder by trying to do it alone.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. What you said, when I was coming here, I was telling my team the same thing, that I think it was only when it was because of somewhere in my head, I feel like, I actually believe that it was because of you that I think I am doing what I'm doing with iDare. And it's because I feel like, because I was able to see what like therapy can do and how much it can help you heal, that now I'm like, you know what? I think a lot of people can actually benefit from this. And I know a lot of people don't have that experience with their therapist the first time around. And I got lucky when I met you and stuff like that. But so Aarti, who is my colleague, and she asked me, but what was that turning point for you? Why did you say that he's the reason, you know? And it was for me because it was that first moment of hope that, oh, you know what? Things can be better and I don't have to live like I am living like this, and there's someone who will understand me more than sometimes I understand myself.
Yeah. And that's key to it, right? And so I got into this because somebody was there for me.
Yeah.
Right? You got into this because somebody was there for you. And there'll be hundreds of people who iDare is there for, Samarpan is there for, and hopefully we'll all want to pay it forward, right?
Yes.
It's all about the community, right? And you're right. I just want to point out that, yes, people have had some really not so good experiences in their first therapy. And that breaks my heart, you know, because that to me is sacred. That first touch point is so important, right?
Yeah.
And I think as therapists, sometimes we get so eager to fix.
Right?
So in our early stages of our journey as therapists, right, there's a certain insecurity. Now you want to demonstrate that you're good.
Yeah.
And in that moment, it becomes about me.
Oh, huh.
And then I forget about it. You just have to hang back.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a very good indicator also for like someone as a client coming into therapy. Is the therapy seeming like a safe space for you, or is it about like therapist being good or all of that? So I also want to go back to something that you said really early on about the idea of not feeling enough. So I think I have come to you multiple times for multiple things, and one of them has been this idea of not feeling enough. And I feel like for people who come from childhood trauma, like, this is my understanding of it, it's that not feeling enough comes as a part of it, the feeling that you're not lovable, or you have to do something to prove that you're lovable. And when you are in that space, you either give up and be like, you know what, I will find my own like space in substance or whatever I need to, or I will go the other end, which is people pleasing. Right?
And perfectionism.
Perfectionism, people pleasing. Now I will make sure I am that person that everybody loves. And I feel like somewhere in that spectrum, I went this side.
This side, yeah.
Right? And so that journey of dealing with your own, after a point, it's not other people who are expecting those things from you.
Critic in your head.
Yeah. Who's telling you that, no, you have to do this, because without that, you're not going to be loved by anybody.
Yeah.
How do you, I know we've spoken about it a lot, but how do you fix that?
So that's the core work of therapy, right? Most of us, this sense of I'm not good enough, this sense of inadequacy, and either escape through substances or overcompensate.
Yeah.
Right? So, see, unfortunately, what's happening, right? Increasingly, we are growing up in cultures and societies that tell you that you of your own have no value. You achieve this, you do this, you be like this, you look like this, and all, then we will say Vaamaa.
Yeah.
Right? Now, this is in the air we breathe. It's in the conversations that happen at home.
Yeah.
It's just there. Right? So, all of us grow up believing in order to be worthy of love and respect, I have to be like this. Now, this could be pretty slim, successful, rich. That will be different for people, right? But I have to be like this, which means this is not good enough. So then we are benchmarking. Okay, I'll get the A's in school, then I'll do extracurriculars, then I'll have 5,000 friends, and then I'll have 5
It never stops.
It never stops, right? So we are always saying we are benchmarking outside of ourselves, right? And then at some point, and the pain is crazy because no matter what you're doing, it's not enough. And then whatever you have to do, everybody has to like you. You can't make a mistake. Your work has to be stellar, right? And
exhausting.
Oh my God, if you're 15 minutes late for an appointment, you have finished, right? Right? So every task you're doing yourself, my sense of self-worth is hinging on that task. Right? That becomes very difficult, right? So the whole idea, how do you get past that, is you find a safe space. It takes a while to understand that you are fine, you are allowed to be you. Then they tell me, then why do anything? Arey Baba, only if you enjoy it here.
Yeah.
If you don't enjoy it, don't do it.
Yeah.
Right? But it is the fundamental message of any counseling is it's okay to be you. And just like every person on the planet, can we be better? Arey Baba, of course we can be better. But my self-worth is not contingent on being better. I want to be better because I will like this part of myself or I want to explore that.
Yeah.
I tell people, all the time, it's absolutely okay to say I want to own a Ferrari. It is not okay to say unless I own a Ferrari, I'm a failure.
Huh.
Right? That's the difference between desire is okay, attachment is the problem. So dream on. What's that Billy Joel song? But don't imagine they'll all come true. Right?
Yeah.
You'll get some of them. But this trap that my identity, my worth, is based on me being a certain version of myself is the trap, and that is the human trap.
Yeah.
So we understand attachment being the cause of suffering. We understand it in material terms. The biggest attachment is to the demands of our ego.
Yeah.
I must be slim. I must have hair on my head. I must have a bank balance looks like this. My holidays must be like this. Last time I checked, Bible and Quran mein nahi hai. So we create this stuff, and it's a lot of it. So there's a psychologist called Gabor Mate. I'm sure.
Yeah.
The Myth of Normal is a book that I highly recommend to anybody to understand how pervasive this is.
Because we've attached this normal and this perfect in our heads that now you're just trying to achieve it, and that perfect keeps changing every time you see a new thing, new person, new this, and it's an exhausting cycle of then you just get exhausted and
life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's celebrated, right? Okay, what are your goals for this year? Arey Baba, what are the goals for this year? No, you have to do more.
Yeah. In the kind of scenario we live in and in this society, right, which is very, like you said, it's in the air. How do you break free from that?
Yeah. So that's a tough part. You need people, right? Sometimes a friend, somebody who understands, right? Quite often, so I highly recommend, right? I don't think mental health services therapy is only if you're suffering from a mental disorder. I think that whole paradigm needs to go,
Yeah.
right? Uh, to talk to a counselor is basically to develop healthy mental habits. We understand healthy physical habits.
Yeah.
We don't follow them, but at least we understand.
Yeah.
Exercise karna chahiye, ye karna chahiye. That we've been taught. Nobody teaches us about mental habits. We go to school, you learn to read, write, ratao. Nobody teaches how to think,
Yeah.
right? And so it's very difficult, right? Most of us have no reason to question what we are thinking or feeling
Yeah.
till we come to a pain point. And if you come to a pain point, whether you're lacking energy, whether you're dry, whether you're stressed, whether you're feeling not good enough, talk to somebody. I mean, you're growing up in an age which this was available, man. And when I was growing up, it was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
They would send you to a psychiatrist, would give you 15 medicines, and then you finished.
Yeah.
But talk, communication, we have to express what you're feeling, and that's why it's a safe space.
Right. So what I'm understanding, whether that's addiction, childhood trauma, perfectionism, any mental health disorder, or just like dealing with everyday issues, right? A huge important factor of it is community, communication, understanding, support systems.
Absolutely, indispensable.
Yeah.
See, the whole world, when you talk about addiction, you talk about depression, you talk about anxiety, you talk about PTSD, you talk about OCD kind of stuff, right? Underneath the clinical symptomatology, which is very real, right, is a world of emotional pain,
Yeah.
right? And that needs to be understood. Not everything needs to be treated.
It needs to be just
It
understood.
needs to be understood. I need to be able to articulate it. I need somebody to tell me, it's okay, Baba,
Yeah.
we'll get through this.
Yeah. I think that first time when you actually express it to somebody and they are able to safely be like, it's okay. I see your pain and I am here holding you for that pain. Doesn't necessarily have to be validating your pain or anything. Just being there,
Just being there.
I think is
That you're
hugely healing, no?
And so you provide that emotional space, and then the tools, right? Then different conditions, different tools help. So the clinical piece is necessary.
Yeah.
But you can't do, in my opinion, you can't do the clinical piece before you do this piece.
Correct. So as important as it is to do the clinical therapy, it's also important to create that safe space, and therapy can be one of those safe spaces.
Absolutely.
And I think the most beautiful part of it would be when you're able to create that safe space within yourself.
So that's the goal, no?
Yeah. When you can hold yourself and be like, this happened to you and I'm here with you.
Yeah.
Which I told you about, that inner child feeling I had. I think
that inner child approach, right? This is many approaches. Right?
Yeah.
The inner child approach, especially if you've got traumatic history, it's phenomenal.
Yeah, and I think I would like to share it with people because I feel like for someone who would feel that, I can't tell you how, I just want to keep telling it to people so that other people can also feel it. I know it doesn't work like that, but it was like, I saw something, it reminded me of something back in the day, and I just cried, but it was so different this time. I wasn't crying in pain. I was crying because I could feel that kid had gone through so much, and now it's my responsibility to make sure she is fine. And I'm holding her, and I'm not crying, holding myself, thinking, oh, this is so painful. But it is like, you know what? That happened, we're here now, and from now we will be safe. We will make sure we put ourselves in environments that are safe, and when we get triggered, we will manage it with intention. We will manage it with knowing that this is how I will behave in that situation, so maybe I should take a step back or whatever it is, right? Managing our triggers the right way.
Absolutely. And it's so beautiful when that happens, right? So when I think about something that happened to me as 8 years old or 9 years old, and I felt shattered and I felt afraid, right? And there can be 20 things that trigger me to feel the same way. And at that moment I realized, okay, so what's happening is I'm flashing back to the child. All I have to do is to comfort the child.
Yeah.
Right, Baba, this is not the same situation. It's okay. You're not 8 years old. I'm there with you.
Yeah.
Once you get the hang of that, then it really changes.
Yeah.
It really changes.
It does.
Yeah.
So I think today's conversation has been amazing in so many ways, and I also want to like come back to the fact that I really am grateful to you, not just for doing this today, but for everything you've done for me in my journey. And like I can't stress this enough that like if not for you, I feel like it would have been a much more difficult, and I don't know where I would be, and I don't even know if iDare would be a thing. So I'm really, really grateful to you for that.
You're making me a blush. Ego. No, but I guess you're welcome. It's been a pleasure working with you. Yeah. You brought so much to the process. You brought this authenticity, right? That was scary. I said, this girl is going to go through a lot of pain if she's this authentic.
Yeah.
But no, just very, very happy to have been part of your journey and to see you doing so well. And God bless iDare. How many years now?
3.
Wow.
Yeah.
All the best, man. You're
Thank
doing some
you.
great work. Thank you.
Before I let you go, we do this thing where we ask everyone on the show, what's your iDare moment? And what that means is everyone thinks mental health, getting over abuse, all of these things is in a way they say, oh, it's attention seeking, or therapy jana is like, oh, you're weak. It's not, it's soft. They don't understand the amount of effort that goes into, the amount of will, the amount of courage that goes into this process. And it's a very like, you have to be strong through that process, yeah. So in our head, iDare is a more empowered approach to coming to this entire healing process, right? So I wanted to know, what is your iDare journey where you felt like odds were against you, everything just felt this, but you mustered up the courage to be like, you know what, I'm going to do this.
There was actually one moment. So that moment was, I think I was around, I just quit getting high, maybe 2 or 3 months. Right? And I remember I was staying with my parents, like I'd moved back into my parents' house. The greatest shame in my life, moving back into my parents' house. And they were going to be gone for the weekend. Right? And immediately my brain went to, this is an opportunity, no one will find out, etc., etc. And I didn't think I could get past it. I thought that I was going to relapse, and then that I'm always going to be this failure, and I'm not going to this thing. But something in that moment, it was a phone call with somebody, right? And there was something in the conversation that transpired, and he just said, keep it in the now, right? And you can do this. It's just a day at a time. You can do this. And maybe because I had some time under my belt, or maybe it was the way he said, or maybe I felt supported, it just gave me the strength to say, okay, I dare to take this on. Like, okay, that this is not going to be the only opportunity I get. And I told myself a lot of stuff, and I've got people with me, and I want to be a certain kind of way. And it was that moment. And that was so important, because once I did it once, there was now a template in place. Right? I may have needed to call that friend to remind me. But then not only was that moment there, but a support was there, right? So in case I forgot that I had the strength, I could connect and get myself reminded. And that really changed a lot.
That's really amazing. How many years sober have you been?
This Saturday will be 24 years.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing this with us and for talking to us. And
my pleasure.
It's been really, really lovely having you here. And thank you so much, everyone, for listening. I hope there were things that you got out of it that will help you somewhere in your journey and will make a difference to your life. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you, guys. Bye.